the new generation of accountants are wanting to focus more on strategy, and for good reason, right? You don't go to school, you don't get your CPA license to learn how to process an AR cash application. Like that should be automated.
Well, welcome, Jotham. Thanks for joining me today. So excited that you're on with me. You and I have had the opportunity to chat on your Accounting Life podcast. And now I'm excited to have you join me here today to talk through some things in the accounting world, including some thoughts maybe on AI, which I know is a hot topic for everybody. But we always like to start with a little bit of a get to know you segment, just so that we can make sure all of our listeners kind of know a little bit more about you. Kind of curious, post-COVID, I love to ask this question. Are you in the office? Do you work remotely? Are you hybrid? What does that look like for you today?
Oh, good question, and really excited to be here as well. Love this part about my job, just getting to connect with the community and leaders like you. So thanks for having me. But to answer your question, post-COVID, I am still definitely mostly an office guy. I started the profession 20 plus years ago, and it's always just been, a big part of like my routine to go to an office and have that separation between like personal life and work. And I think the physical proximity of my office too helps a lot. I only live 5 minutes away from my home. So
I'm jealous. That sounds like my commute from my bedroom to my office in the morning.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. If you're a founder and CEO of a company, you may have a say in where your offices could be.
That's a fair point. I like it. Well, I was going to ask where your desk is if it's in your home, but I guess since you're in the office primarily, you're in an office. We get some kind of funny responses when we ask about where your desk is at home. So in the office makes sense. Now, I hear you're quite the world traveler. I'm curious what the best place you've been in the last, say, year is and why?
World traveler only because being multicultural myself, so I'm actually half Chinese and half Filipino. From
Ooh.
a very early age. Both are Asian countries, but from a cultural perspective, very different. And I think because I grew up in that type of environment, I've always been fascinated by different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, they're the most, like, to me, unique and kind of like first time experience of this type of culture was in Egypt. The Egyptian experience was incredible. That was about 9 months ago. I did that during Labor Day.
Wow.
But everything from the food, the sites, and the history, I mean, it's just incredible to think that certain structures were built like 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. In California, where I'm from, everything was built in the 1800s or later. So I thought that was
A
pretty
little
interesting.
different.
A little different. And yeah, it was just very stimulating in terms of like, the different sites, experiences, food, and the desert too. I didn't know I would be so interested in like a desert type terrain, but I kind of did the camel riding experience. It was scorching hot, but all worth it.
That sounds incredible. Never been, but now I definitely want to go. Now, I know you also have an affinity for cruise ships, which doesn't necessarily work in with a trip to Egypt, but tell me a little bit about why you like cruises so much.
I'm going to have to get on my marketing team about that. They are misconstruing what I meant by cruise ship. So I'll have to let out my secret now. And this is a hack. If you're a founder or a busy professional, my hack is, I go through waves of like very crazy periods, right? Where I'm working a lot, burning the midnight oil and so on. And a lot of times it's hard for founders like me to get good quality sleep because we're always thinking about, the next big thing. It's just in our nature to do that. On a cruise ship, there's a few things that can minimize the things that prohibit you from enjoying rest. One, cruise ships have very poor Wi-Fi, so no one can get a hold of you. Two, the swaying of the boat actually lulls you to sleep. I mean, it's real, so it's so real, and I'm such a big fan of it. The swaying allows me to sleep past 7 a.m., which is impossible for me to do outside of that environment.
I
I'm not the
like
guy
that.
like doing the bongo lines or the crazy cruise like parties. I am just there to get rest. So I want to set the record straight on that.
I like that. I think that's a really critical piece, especially like, we're talking about accountants and both of us having been in this space for so long, we know the lack of sleep that oftentimes comes along with it. I just posted recently about the mental health impacts sometimes that a job like this has on folks. And so it's so hypercritical to really unplug. And sometimes I guess lack of Wi-Fi kind of forces that. So I think it's a unique way to pose it, but certainly a very valuable lesson I think that we can all probably learn from.
Yeah, well, I know we're probably likely to talk about automation at some point during this call, but I think that's where the significance of automation helps, right? So
Yeah.
because historically in accounting, we're just used to like writing it out during a short month end close period. I've always just been accustomed of you got to get through it. But with
Yeah.
automation solutions like Zora and Gappify, we can distribute that work so it's not so compact in a certain period.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, and this is a little bit self-serving, but I'm so curious, how do you think of the holistic, say, accounting process? Like, I think of it as order to revenue or quote to cash or quote to revenue. Like, how do you think of that process and how would you dub it? Or when you talk about it in your day-to-day life, how do you think about it?
Yeah, well, some from someone who has spent many years in SOX compliance, and that's actually how I started my career. Every company or client that I had named it differently, right? You have OTC, order to cash. You have quote
Yep.
to cash. You have lead to cash. You have lead to revenue. Um, but I think the angle, and I'll try to like be concise about explaining this. The angle I'm coming from now as a CEO, I understand the importance of management reporting and
Mm-hmm.
the types of questions you get from investors and analysts. So, and people want to break down like what my gap revenue is by lead source, right? So, what marketing channel did it come from? Is it outbound, inbound events? And show me what the attributed revenue is on a gap basis after 606. So, in order for you to
Yeah.
think about it that way, you really have to think about it all the way from the beginning starting point of the revenue cycle, for lack of better words. So I call
Mm-hmm.
it lead
Yep.
to reporting. I think that's the most
Lead to report.
comprehensive. So
I
that's a
think
new
you're
one
right.
that I haven't seen anywhere
All
else.
right. I'm going to add it in as an example and see who else jumps on that. I like it.
Starting a new trend here, lead to reporting, LTR.
LTR, lead to reporting. I'm going to start adopting that. I like it. Now, you just mentioned CEO. So I'm sure everybody's really curious about your journey, what it looks like from accountant to CEO and founder. Like, tell me about that.
Well, believe it or not, my journey to founder led or came from my nature as an accountant, as a problem solver, right? So I spent many years, I just mentioned, doing Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. My firm also is a very small firm. We also help implement SaaS solutions and help enterprises scale their accounting operations globally. And as I got my hands on like several dozen clients, it was just very clear that automation was lacking. And
Mm-hmm.
so, from my perspective, I saw this incredible opportunity to make an impact and make a difference to the profession that I love and care about. And so, really based on the necessity that I saw in the market, is what prompted me to start Gapify. Like, I don't have this, insane like goal of being like a trillionaire someday. I think, obviously, solutioning for the market and the profession, yeah, it just means a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's like so many in our profession really are passionate about what we do and where we come from and where we're going and how we can help make the lives better for those of us or those around us. And I know like your LinkedIn profile, for example, says you're a proud accountant. So we're all celebrating accountants here on the show and curious like what that has really meant to you. Like why are you proud of being an accountant and how do you feel about the accounting profession in general?
Well, it really starts from, fast forward as quickly as I can. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a pretty humble, like blue collar, like town where people don't really have access to like corporate America and capital markets.
Hmm.
So for me, accounting was so special because it gave me the opportunity to kind of carve out a niche within that broader corporate world, then be able to grow into it, right? So it was like kind of the door that opened that world to me, which I appreciate. Like being an accountant, not only obviously you have an incredible and important role in that ecosystem because trusted financial statements make capital markets work.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was just grateful for that opportunity to pursue a world that I didn't think I had access to otherwise. Um, and then beyond that, just the learnings that you get from accounting. I mean, this, like we get
Yeah.
to ask every department in a business, what do you do? What do you do? So
Yeah.
the information and the growth opportunity in accounting is just great, which is why it's an important part of my identity.
I'm curious, in starting your company, was it sort of a vision that you saw and developed over a long period of time? Were you just sort of like, all right, let's try it and see what happens? Like, how did that go from the work that you were doing into, boy, I can really do something more with this? And what kind of gave you that kickstart to take the leap and start your own company?
Yeah, well, I was always first passionate, but I always was very confident about the market needs because I saw it enough
Hmm.
in the clients that I service. And the problem set that I really saw was you take that month end close checklist and go up and
Hmm.
down every single line item, and you can find opportunities to automate. So I had confidence in that, and which is why, like as a risk averse accountant, I wasn't overly concerned that we wouldn't be able to make something work. In fact, and it's still true to this day, like what I learned as I started the company was my scope. I wanted it to be like this because there's so much, again, opportunities to automate. What
Yeah.
our investors, our board and management team have all, kind of emphasized over time is that there has to be focus, right? So that's why we started with accrual management. There's a lot of great opportunities to automate there. Can't do all these other areas all at the same time. So being methodical about which areas to attack first was a big realization I had as we were growing the company.
Now, in dealing with all of these different clients and customers that you have, what do you see as one of the top challenges that revenue or general accountants have today? You keep mentioning like the month end. I'm just kind of curious if that's where you see most of that challenge, or if it's more broad.
I mean, I would have to say, from a revenue perspective, I have seen and felt the agony in that area for so many years, and I can see why. It's really easy to see why. And first of all, top line has more focus than other parts of the P&L,
Hmm.
and that rightfully so. And it's the same with our business. But the volume of data needed to do everything in that cycle, that lead to reporting cycle, the amount of data involved and the amount of processing and technical prowess involved to get these numbers right. Yeah, I
Hmm.
can see from your reaction
I
there.
hear
You
you. I
like
hear you.
like
Yeah.
I started with 97.2, then it went 0801, and now it's 606. Like, geez, when you think you have something figured out, something new gets thrown your way. It's
Exactly.
fun and crazy at the same time.
Yeah. It keeps us busy and keeps us employed, I guess.
That's very
Now,
true.
I think, technology contributes to accountants being viewed a little bit more differently, right? Like, I think now I'm hearing more about accountants being viewed more as a value center, whereas before it was sort of, accounting is this wall that's built to just really make things more difficult. And so I see accountants being considered more as like a partner to the business. But curious your point of view on what you're hearing from your customers and the overall accounting community around technology and how that's helping to maybe change the view of how accountants are seen in the workplace.
Yeah, and it's a very relevant topic these days. I think the themes here are a big part of why we're seeing the mass exodus that we're seeing in the profession, which
Mm-hmm.
is we have these newer, and I'm like dating myself or making myself sound old, which I guess I am. The new generation of accountants are wanting to focus more on strategy, and for good reason, right? You don't go to
Yeah.
school, you don't get your CPA license to learn how to process an AR cash application. Like that should be automated.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the value though, if we can rely on automation to do the mechanical work, the value that we accountants bring is our subject matter expertise in financial reporting. And for us to be that value center, we have to partner with a business. We have to get a better understanding and more in-depth understanding of what marketing is looking to accomplish with an event, because that can impact the way prepaid is handled, or maybe the way 606 revenue is attributed for reporting. And we have not historically spent enough time doing that. And so it is really in my hope that obviously solutions, amazing solutions like Zora and others can help accountants finally focus on that value add part of their responsibility. And if automation doesn't do that for our profession, then we're gonna be hurting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's this dichotomy right now because we want to automate, we want this technology to help us, and then we hear about, and I'm going to bring up like the topic that everybody talks about right now, but like AI, right? And so there's this notion of, is AI going to take over our jobs, right? And what is that going to do with the role of accounting? So curious your thoughts on that. I know you've been testing the waters a little bit on LinkedIn with some surveys and some thoughts, which I would love to dive into here with you.
Yeah, well, and I've also I've been experimenting with some of the technologies out there, and obviously in my role, that's important. But I've gotten a chance to talk to a lot of our customers about how they feel about the topic. And I guess what I'll say, is that like from a technology perspective, it should be a catalyst to get to the point that we talked about previously, which is getting accountants to a point where they can be more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
AI cannot be strategic and based on the nature of how we have to apply rules, understand business context. It can support with the data gathering process, and it should, but because it does that doesn't mean there's no room for accountants to provide, kind of the human element that's needed to make this all work.
Yeah.
And so I get like how and gosh, I'll voice this as an open concern. I think the broader market outside of accounting has this perception that all we do in accounting is invoice processing, right? Like all day. You, Jotham, oh, you got out of life of invoice processing, good for you. No, that's not what we were doing. We were filing
Yeah.
10Qs and 10Ks.
Yeah.
Uh, but for the public to like really take broad strokes at say, hey, AI can do invoice processing, therefore accountants are useless, is just categorically false. And I hope the narrative changes because it has an impact to us in accountants. And so
Mm-hmm.
if if folks on the outside are thinking that and socializing the idea that AI will replace accountants, and we hear that, then we may not want to adopt that technology, even though in reality it's helping supplement what we do as accountants. So I hope that narrative changes, but it's been tough.
It has been, but I agree. And the more I talk about it, the better I feel. And I think there are ways we can leverage AI, but it won't necessarily take over. It'll actually make us stronger in our profession, which is, I feel like, to our benefit and a pretty cool aspect if we can get over the fear factor of it, right? Now, as a former accountant, what advice would you give to accounting leaders, maybe even individual contributors, on how to partner with the business? Like, how can you become that value center that we just spoke of, and how can we change the way in which maybe this profession is thought of?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that jumped out my mind as you were asking that is just the relationship aspect, right? So when you're partnering with a business, it is a partnership, right? So you have to develop rapport, you have to connect. And I think a lot of us in accounting, especially again, going back to me being an oldie here, when and I don't know if it was similar with you, Em, but in audit, it was very transactional, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
need these sample sizes. Okay, thank you, bye.
Yeah.
And we even see that in this industry. Like, oh yeah, month end close checklist. I'm supposed to reach out to you for this, and then that's it. I think for this next generation, it has to be, hey, product manager, let's go have a lunch. Like, let's get to know each other because I need to collaborate with you and partner with you. And I know that's not like the technical probably answer to your question, but I do believe that the relationships have to be strong for people to collaborate in this very dynamic environment.
I think there is this notion of accountants being the I pick things up, I put them down. I pick things up, I put them down, and that's not the case, right? I think maybe sometimes we're forced into that sort of motion given the tools we are provided with sometimes, or what we aren't provided with and need to make do with. But I think it's also up to us a little bit as well. Like, how do you think about folks like yourself and me and other accountants who are still part of this community and really passionate? How can we help reverse that trend in how the accounting profession is seen, so we can really become those collaborative partners in the business, instead of those, robots just trying to do month-end close or processing invoices? You brought up some really great examples of things that I think people's minds automatically go to with accountants.
Yeah, and listen, it's not like a quick resolution by any means, but it ties the points that we've been talking about, and something that you also just brought up, which is we have to kind of be mechanical sometimes because we have so much stuff to do. I was going to use a different word.
Yeah.
But we have no choice but just to like get what we need and move on because we have a million other things to do. So how do we change that? Like, I think we all have to raise our hand and find automation opportunities that will help us reduce that workload, right? It's a top-down way of solving this issue. Like, we're going to be transactional. We're not going to be a value center if we're so bogged down with mechanical tasks. We have to invest in technology. And it's up to us accountants to raise our hand and say, hey, we need Zora for billing. We need Gappify for accruals. And we can't expect leadership to really say, hey, you need this, you need that. Like, it should come from us. And if we can, if we can be a little bit more assertive with that, then we put ourselves in position to procure a system, then implement it, and then be able to get away from the mechanical work so we can be more of a value driver to the business.
Yeah, agreed. That's a perfect example of that strategic aspect of the job, that we can really elevate what it is and that accountants do, how they are seen, and how we're thinking, right? So I think that's actually a perfect example. For anybody kind of thinking about maybe an alternative career path, what are some options you see, or what are some recommendations you might make to someone who's thinking about their next move or where they could go with an accounting career?
I may be a little bit biased here, Em, but I think it yields so many options compared relative to other job functions. And I think our exposure to the business broadly gives us some optionality there. So, obviously product management, working for a software company in the accounting space is one natural way. Systems and IT is another natural way because a lot of what the financial transactions are driven by are our systems. But also, like, for the revenue accountants, I don't know if you've seen this as well. They can become rev ops, then they become sales ops, then all of a sudden they're an AE or like some kind of account management function. So I've seen all sorts of different pathways, and that's why I'm again such a big proponent of the profession. It opens a lot of doors. What bums me out though is just the folks leaving the profession because we could not automate fast enough for them.
Yeah.
It's totally cool with me if you're an accountant and you have aspirations for a new role, but if you're leaving because you couldn't automate accounting processes, it's a bummer.
It is. It is. That's like we've almost failed ourselves, to not be able to take advantage of technology that is very much available. It's how we choose the right solutions, how we implement them, and how we use them in our day-to-day lives to really make sure that we're holding on to that talent, so we're not losing it for the reasons that are that we shouldn't, right? And so I think that that's a fabulous point. Now, final question for you. What's the one sort of non-obvious insight that you wish that your clients or customers knew?
That's a really good question. So I think technology now, and I'll have to tie this into the AI conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There is definitely a lot of interest in figuring out how AI can apply to not only our technology, but across the board. You're hearing more and more. Actually, the biggest like board topic from last quarter, and this is widely known, the biggest board discussion centered around AI last quarter, and I think it will be for the next quarter to come as well. Um, so for us, Gappify specifically, it's definitely in our radar. So um, we obviously are focused on our current roadmap, but the application of AI and the way it can help our customers is something where it's an insight that we wish and we don't want to like over index against AI either, because we want to be careful and prudent about our analysis and position our product properly. But it's definitely part of the calculus now.
Yeah, I feel like we've got to be so cognizant and keep it in the purview, but without letting it take over. And so I think there's a balance there, right, to figuring out, making sure we're aware of it, taking advantage of it where we can, but not putting ourselves into a reactionary mode where we are, like you said, over-indexing on that. So, in general, a very great point, but something I think everybody should really be thinking about, and have it kind of top of mind here, especially in the next couple of quarters as we figure out what all of this means.
Right. I love GPT-4 for recommending Mexican mole restaurants like around me. It's a great use case for that.
I recently saw someone that actually had their entire vacation itinerary drawn out within 3 or 4 minutes, and literally had down to restaurants, transportation to take, and how long it would take them to get there. So it's really a wild tool. I just need to figure out how to make it help it make me a better parent. Haven't figured out that piece yet, but we'll see how it goes.
Oh, AI.
Yeah. Well, Jotham, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. It's been a true pleasure chatting with you, and look forward to having you back again.
Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.
This podcast is brought to you by Zora Revenue. Automate revenue recognition for any business model, enabling your teams to reconcile and report on revenue in real time.
Listeners, my DMs are always open to you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at mdaigle, that's EMDAIGLE, and follow me for insights that help accounting leaders grow in their career, modernize their teams, and ultimately become more influential partners in business. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.